And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
Welcome to Open Connection. I'm your host, Robert Pictou. After the Canadian Indian residential school disclosures in the 1990s and early 2000s, researchers and educators began to catalog the impacts of residential schools, first as an educational process and later to assist with healing. On today's Open Connection, motivational speaker Mike Scott.
Tanse everyone, pimihat kayu pinichikimawan, Mike Scott ni sigasin, nia ochiwe namiwe sagahiginik niginuksin Saskatoon. My name is Mike Scott and I'm from the Sturgeon Lake First Nation and I am living in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan. So I can go back at least 8 generations of oppression, assimilation, institutionalization from my great Chapan all the way down to my granddaughters basically that are currently in foster care here and there. So my mom didn't know her mother because she committed suicide when she was just a little girl. My mom was only like 6 years old when she lost her mom. But every generation, even before her, was placed into some kind of building. So there was like a sanitarium, then the residential school system. Then my mom was in group homes, foster care, and the residential school system. And it kind of trickled down to me, all those intergenerational traumas that we feel as Indigenous people because of those schools. So my parents didn't receive, love and caringness and kindness and all those good things that they should have had, their culture, identity, language. It was taken away and they kind of just replaced it with things that could help cure their pain for that little bit of moment, which was drugs and alcohol. So that trickled down towards me, living in really dysfunctional home settings, really toxic environments. And I ended up in foster care because of that. So for the first, 10 years of my life, I was in and out of foster care across Saskatchewan. And that kind of just set me on a really destructive course as a young person because I also didn't have my language, my culture, my identity. The good things that I should have had were not passed down to me. And I used to wonder why is my family so messed up? Like, why does my mom drink Listerine and hairspray? And, why does she live this way? And I didn't know until further on in life that my mom was a part of that system. So I used to blame a lot of the people around me for my upbringing because I had no understanding of where my family came from. And yeah, that's kind of the younger years of my life.
You really couldn't have a place called home because they kept shifting you every time you were kind of getting established and at school and such?
Yeah, I've been in numerous foster homes across Saskatchewan, even different family members too. I have countless schools that I've attended, countless different communities and little towns that I've lived in. And I've never had, like what you said, an actual home that I could call home. I'm constantly moving every year, sometimes multiple times within a year. The foster care system is also pretty terrible. Well, it was back then. I don't know too much now. I'm an adult, so I can't really speak too much on that. But when I was younger, I was getting a new social worker every other month, so how am I supposed to build trust or a relationship or have any of these kinds of things with somebody I don't know because I get a new one every other month?
I guess at any point in someone's life, you finally said, I've had enough. I'm just going to do my own thing. Did you write that crisis point?
Well, when I was 10 and I came back from the foster care system, I was kind of placed into another toxic environment, right? Because the inner city of Saskatoon is filled with a lot of people like me, it's a typical story for Indigenous people to go through that intergenerational trauma of residential schools. And a lot of us live in poverty. So the only area that we could live in and afford to live in was the inner city. And that's filled with, gangs and prostitution, violence, drugs and alcohol. And it just filled with a lot of negativity. So that's the environment that I got placed back into when I got taken from foster care. And some of the things that I loved to do in foster care was play sports. especially organized sports, soccer, basketball, whatever it was. When I came back home, there wasn't really that type of stuff available for me. We couldn't afford it. We couldn't, we didn't have a vehicle, so I couldn't drive to these practices or these games or, a lot of those different things. So I attached myself to the local kids. And it's really, your life can be changed drastically just by who you surround yourself with. So a lot of the young people that I live nearby, they were also in the similar situations I was placed in. So a lot of the things that we started to do were just really minimal stuff, like stealing chocolate bars and bubble gum and whatever we could get our hands on from the store. And then it slowly elevates to a whole new level where now we're stealing smokes from our parents. Now we're stealing from houses, we're finding valuables. We're starting to develop addictions because we realized what our parents were doing was suppressing the emotions and the feelings that they didn't want to go through. They didn't want to grow through it. So they just hid their emotions. And a lot of us young people, we latched onto that as a coping mechanism because we didn't know other ways. People didn't talk about things that happened to them. People didn't speak about what was wrong in their lives. We kind of just lived day to day.
Open Connection will be right back after these messages. And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
Thank you for staying with us. According to the Government of Canada website, over 40% of crimes committed by offenders admitted to the Canadian federal institutions are associated with substance use. Let us return to the conversation as Mike shares how he became incarcerated at the age of 11.
When I was 11, I was already doing a lot of crazy things. I was already addicted to weed. I was drinking every day, smoking every day, and that's an addiction. You have to feed it, and it costs money. Drug dealers don't take bubble gum and chocolate bars. I have to steal things that are actually worth money now. So me and one of my role models, my older cousin, we ended up almost killing two boys basically over like $20. And it was such an ugly situation, So I got arrested in grade 7 when I was 12. And I got out when I was going into grade 10. I was almost like 14 years old. So I did about close to 2 years in jail when I was 12 to 14. People they don't pass you weed or drugs or whatever for the first time. They don't say, oh, by the way, if you take this, it might become addictive. You might need to continuously feed this. It might lead to other stuff. People don't say that to you. They kind of just give you that outlet, like, here, try this. And once you take it for the first time, it can do something to your brain, especially as a young kid. I was only like 11 years old, and I'm smoking this every day. It's got to do something to my brain, right? It's kind of releasing those dopamines and the endorphins that you get when you play sports. So I kind of get that feeling like I love it. And it opened up new doors that I never thought I would open. 11 years old, I agreed and I allowed my role model, my cousin, to stick a needle into my arm. And when I speak and I share my story, I hate to relive that moment. It was my first and my last time ever injecting that type of drug into my body. But I speak on the reality of it, of how fast your life can transform or it can end, because almost all of my sisters have passed away from drug overdoses, and that could have been the journey for me to continue. And a lot of the people that I grew up with, they're still on that path. A lot of them have HIV today. A lot of them don't look the same, like a lot of them are in their early 30s, late 30s, and they look like their bodies are just done.
Where was a crisis point for you to where you finally said, I got to do something different?
It's hard to see hope when you're constantly surrounded by darkness. It's hard to see that light when all you see is negativity, right? Like, I didn't have people around me that were succeeding in any way, shape, or form. People are either drug dealers or they're on welfare, they're either like bumming for money or they're not really doing anything productive. So when that's all you see in that environment, that's all you believe that you can achieve in life. And that's the way I looked at it. I said, I guess that's all that there is for me. Outside of my city of Saskatoon, I didn't really know that there was much more for me to see. I thought, this is it, this little area of the city. This is where I'm going to be now for the rest of my days until I go. And people don't mention how lonely that life is of addiction. Like 10 years old, I was on my own already, like people call me an old soul. And it took a long time for me to kind of understand that. And you're saying, yeah, like you compressed a lot of your adult life into, like, before you were even a teenager, I was basically an adult, because even in the foster care system, a lot of the things that I've been through, it's kind of like they prepared me to come into this world, because it's just lonely to live a life of addiction. It's a really sad path. And I'm one of the lucky ones that made it out, and it's choices that I've made. And one of the biggest turning points, I feel, because it didn't even, like, my mom passed away, right? She passed away on August 4th, 2011. And I was in my early 20s when I lost her. And she was like one of the rocks of my family, for me especially, like you have that connection with your mom or your dad or whoever takes care. You have that one person. And even after she died, I didn't quit. It's almost like it amplified my pain even more. So prior to her leaving this place, I was still drinking lots, heavily. And then it got to the point where I was now drinking like every single day. Like I'd binge drink, which is very, very terrible for your body. I'd wake up like literally shaking. I'd have tremors, they're called. I'd have these alcoholic withdrawals. In my early 20s, I was already developing cirrhosis of the liver. I was throwing up blood every day. Like, some people don't really understand the extent of my alcoholism. And it was damaging. Like, I could have died from cirrhosis. And my daughter came into the room one day and basically passed me my alcohol, that was on the table or the counter, or wherever it was. And she said, "Here, daddy, drink this, you'll feel better." And I feel like that's a big turning point for me. But a lot of our people, anybody who's addicted to something that wants to quit, we kind of just don't know where to start. And if I was to share a positive message with anybody today, I'd say just something as simple as praying to Creator, to God, whoever it is that you believe in, just say, "Help me." And be ready for those messengers and those helpers, because they're going to come in different forms. We have to be careful of the things that we pray for. And if you're actually ready to receive that help, because I wasn't when I first got it. Somebody said, "Hey, would you like to go to treatment?" And I was like, playing it off. Like, I don't have an issue. I don't have a problem. But deep down, I knew that I wanted change. I just didn't know how to get it. So saying "help me" is what helped me.
Open Connection will be right back after these messages. And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
Welcome back to Open Connection. Drinking alcohol is associated with both short-term and long-term health consequences. While short-term issues may last a few hours or days, long-term health consequences may never go away. Let us return to the conversation as Mike shares why he entered an alcohol treatment program.
I wanted to go to treatment so that I could heal my body, so that I could go back to drinking, because that's all I'd really ever known, was just to hide my pain. And one of the crazy things is that I found love for myself within that treatment center. And it's something that I've never had in my entire life. I've always searched in other people for love, and I've never given it to myself directly. So when I found love and I could actually look into the mirror and I could see myself, like I could see my spirit and who I was, I feel like that was a really huge turning point for me, because it was almost like the light bulb clicked on. It was like, thank you for surviving through all the stuff that you've been through, thank you for still fighting today. And I was like filled with so much emotion. I was like just screaming it to myself, "I love you, I love you." And they have like pretty thin walls inside the treatment center, like, "Shut up, man, love yourself tomorrow," type of thing. So when I found love for me, it was like my first few weeks there, it was miserable, right? Because I'm coming off a withdrawal. I don't want to be in this place. Everybody's really older than me. And now I love myself. So now I'm starting to partake in these classes, these meetings and stuff that they have. And I'm learning about, childhood trauma. I think that's one of the first things that really opened my eyes. It was if you never admit you have problems in your life, you will never, ever find solutions. You will constantly run to the ends of the earth to try to get away from yourself, which is ridiculous because you can never run away from yourself or the problems that are inside of you. So when you start to deal with these problems, these issues that you have in your life, don't overwhelm yourself and try to take on the world all at one time, because you will fall down and it's going to really hurt, and it could send you back towards that path. So my advice to anybody that's dealing with addictions or anything like that's holding them back is, it might sound corny, but it's for real. It's like, take it one day at a time, take it one situation, one moment at a time. And don't overwhelm yourself with the reality of what you're facing, because dealing with a lifetime of trauma doesn't happen overnight. And as an addict, we're so used to instant gratification. We're like, we'll take a puff of that weed or that alcohol or whatever it is that we're using, and instantly we feel relief. We're like, oh, you feel good. But healing doesn't work that way. Healing is a slow, long, hard process that you have to constantly work at every single day. And one of the things that really helped me was understanding that I compared myself to a lot of people, especially in the first, year of my recovery. I'm like, oh man, this person's like 10 years, 20 years, whatever it was. And I would be like, I'm not nothing compared to that. And I didn't realize they were in my position at one point too. So I stopped comparing myself to everybody else. And I just told myself, if you don't ever try to be better than people, just be better than who you were yesterday. And if you can do that, then positive things are going to happen in your life.
Open Connection will be right back after these messages. And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
During detox, your body metabolizes any remaining alcohol out of your system, which clears your mind and heals your body so that you can truly begin the recovery process. In this final segment of Open Connection, Mike shares his recovery process.
When I got out of treatment, I had to provide, right? I had to have a living somehow. So I started working different jobs. I was working in the mining industry for a while, and I just felt no sense of purpose within that place. Construction, anything like that just didn't really give me a purpose in life. It was kind of just like a paycheck. So within my spare time, I was getting involved in different types of meetings and stuff like that. And one of the things that brought me in there was like the free food, like every Thursday at 6 p.m. we're going to have a meeting, and this week we're having pizza or whatever it was. Right? I was like, I'm going to be hungry on Thursday at 6, so I'm going there. So I started off as a participant, just learning, just figuring out how to facilitate groups, how to be a part of a group, how to listen without thinking of an automatic response, So that was the first part of it. And by showing these people, I'm very interested, I really want a better life. They gave me an opportunity, and they said, why don't you take part in this group and you can be one of the facilitators? And it was basically called Blueprints to Peace, I believe. And it was like a facilitation group on violence in women's lives. And I could relate a lot to that because of the violence that my mom endured when I was a kid and what I'd witnessed from domestic abuse. So I really took that program to heart, and we went around the city and we did some workshops. And the guy running that, he was like, hey, we have this really big, awesome opportunity to go to Ottawa. And he's like, would you like to come? We can fundraise and get you planes and hotels. And I was like, no, man, like if God wanted me to fly, he would have gave me wings. I was just scared to fly because I'd never been on a plane before. And finally, he's like, I think it'd be a great opportunity for you to come. So I did it, I helped make some bannock and got my way to Ottawa. And there was somebody who didn't show up for their workshop. So me being like one of the only Native people there, my hair was pretty short, but I had these 2 little braids already growing. And he didn't show up. It was the Idle No More workshop. And I kind of knew a little bit, but not enough to speak to these people, but I still did it anyways. And there was 2 Native ladies within that group, and they were like, hey, you're a very powerful speaker. You should come to my community. And I was like, no, thanks. They're like, come on, just come share your life with us. And I was like, no, thank you. I was scared to like speak, right? Because I've only done it once in that treatment center. I've only shared my story, a little bit of it. And I finally agreed. You know, they took me to their community and I shared my life story in front of all these, you know, strangers, all these young people, and everybody's crying. I'm crying. And, you know, I realized the power that your words can have on people, especially if they can relate to it and they're in similar situations. So that was the first time I spoke and I shared my story. And after that, I got more opportunities. And I started working with people out here in Saskatchewan. There's a group, an organization called Burn Youth. I can't remember what the acronyms are for, but it's like bettering your communities, that type of stuff, you know, help empower youth. And he said, you know, every weekend, if you're not busy, I'd like to bring you out and you can come in and do these workshops. It's just powerful stuff, you know. And just like anything else, you know, if you do a good job at it, if you're passionate and you truly believe in what you're doing is going to help people, and if you have the intention to help people, Creator is going to help you spread your message along the way. So it was word of mouth. One community heard it, another community heard it, and it just kind of spread like wildfire. So since that moment that I started, I've been to like 500 plus community, maybe even 600 communities across Turtle Island. I feel like the people who sit like this, they're very emotionless, they're very unresponsive, but they're listening. I feel like those are the ones that need to hear it the most, because they're the ones who are hiding a lot of the stuff that they're going through. And there's been communities that I've been to, that I've spoken to, where people have been like that. And I've had the opportunity to go back and I've got to see the transformation, right? Because when I go to a place, I'm only there for a very, very short amount of time, and I don't get to hear and find out what happens afterwards. So it's a blessing to go back and see people actually transform their lives. I've had people come up and they're like, you changed my life, you know? And I'm like, no, I didn't. It's like, I can't change anybody's life, you know? Like, I gave you some tools, I shared my life. You did the work. You're the one who put that time and effort into making your life better. I might have helped turn a light bulb on, but that's all I did, you know? Currently, I'm a full-time student at the University of Saskatchewan. I'm in my third year, almost fourth year of Indigenous studies. So I'm getting my bachelor's degree probably within a year or so. That's one of my main goals. Not too much, you know, speaking more often now because of COVID. You know, I feel a lot of communities are just yearning for positivity and learning and that type of stuff, because when COVID happened, you know, like everything was shut down. Everything. What I do is I need a large group of people. Online is okay, but to me, that personal interaction is so much more meaningful. I feel like technology kind of just takes away from our words and our spirit in a sense, you know. It would have been nice to be here in person with you sharing this type of stuff, but this is what we had to relate to, and it's okay, you know, there's nothing wrong with it. It's just like the future for me is looking bright. There's a lot of different things here and there that are going to happen. You know, I'm not perfect. My life is not far from perfect. It is. Nobody's going to be living a perfect life. We're all going to have ups and downs. There's going to be loss. There's going to be failure. There's going to be a lot of these different things. But I feel like my life is beautiful because I'm choosing to make it beautiful.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Open Connection. The greatest distance in the existence of man is not from here to there, but the connection from his mind to his heart. If we can conquer that distance, we can soar like an eagle and realize our immensity within. I'm Robert Pictou.